I try to make it through my life in my way. There's you. I try to make it through these lies. That's all I do. Just don't deny it. Just don't deny it and deal with it. Yeah, deal with it. You try to break me, you wanna break me bit by bit. That's just part of it. If you were dead or still alive, I don't care, I don't care. And all the things you left behind, I don't care, I don't care. I try to make you see my side, always trying to stay in line, but your eyes see right through, that's all they do. I'm getting tired of this shit, I got no room when it's like this. What you want of me, just deal with it. So, if you were dead or still alive, I don't care, I don't care. And all the things you left behind, I don't care, I don't care. Not taking care of it, not taking care of it. You won't be there for me, you won't be there for If you were dead or still alive, I don't care, I don't care. And all the things you left behind, I don't care, I don't care. If you were dead or still alive, I don't care, I don't care. And all the things you left behind, I don't care, I don't care at all.
All right, a little on the dark side today with that particular song. I'm not in a dark mood. That's the song that ended up playing. Okay, we talked about the manual premium in our last video. In this video, we want to talk about the standard premium. Now, the standard premium, that's what companies actually pay. The manual premium is the starting point for calculating the standard premium. But manual premium is not what companies pay. There's going to be some adjustments that are made to the manual premium, and that results in the standard premium. And in fact, that's what we have when we define standard premium. The premium after adjustments for the EMR, which we'll discuss, and other adjustments could include debits or credits, which we'll also talk about in a little more detail. This does not include adjustments for premium discounts that are due to the size of the premium. There's no volume discount. We're not talking about volume discounts here. That's a completely separate thing. Here is the formula for calculating the standard premium. It's still pretty simple, but it's a little bit more involved than the formula for the manual premium. But if we break it down, that's going to help. This, what we have here inside of these brackets, let me circle it if I can. What we have here inside of these brackets, that's the manual premium formula. So we calculate the manual premium, then we multiply that value by the experience modification rating, and then we add for any debits, which is, that's an additional payment that's needed, or we subtract any credits. That's your standard premium. Again, it is the manual premium adjusted for experience modification rate, credits, and or debits. Well, usually it's not going to be and or. It's not going to be debits and or. It's going to be debits or credits. Companies are going to either receive debits, which are like a penalty, or credits that are like a reward and will save money. But we'll talk about those in a little more detail as we move along. But first of all, let's talk about the EMR. This, I would argue, there might be somebody out there that disagree with me, but I doubt it. I would argue this is the most important measure in safety management. EMR stands for the experience modification rate. It's also referred to as the EMOD, the experience modifier, or the experience rating. It is a single value that's calculated by a third-party ratings board. The NCCI does most EMR calculations. Remember, we talked about the NCCI in the previous video. They do most of the calculations for the experience modification rate. The experience modification rate is based upon the expected losses, the losses that a company is expected to have, and the actual losses the company actually does experience, payroll, and work classifications. It's calculated, the EMR is calculated on 3 years of data, not to include the previous year, or excluding the previous year. I said that two different ways. So let me put some numbers in here to make that more clear. A company's EMR for the year 2024 is going to be based upon data for 2020, 2021, and 2022. 2023 is not considered when calculating the EMR for 2024. It does not include the previous year's data. It excludes the previous year's data. Very simply mathematically, and I'm going to show you the complex formulas that are involved to get to this simple version here in a second. But very simply, what we're talking about is the ratio of the actual losses to the expected losses. The EMR, experience modification rate, equals the actual losses divided by the expected losses. But where it gets complicated, and I'm not expecting you guys to get into the complicated side of things, where it gets complicated from a calculation standpoint is how they determine actual losses and expected losses. Actual losses are really fairly easy. Expected losses are a little more challenging. But I'll kind of give you a quick overview of the formulas that are used and so on here in just a second. But all you'll need to know for our purposes in this class and as a beginning safety manager is that the EMR is very important, and it's a ratio of actual losses to expected losses. The EMR that is calculated will have a value around 1.0. 1.0 is considered an average EMR for a company. That 1.0, that represents a condition where the actual losses are equal to the expected losses. Actual losses of 100,000 divided by expected losses of 100,000 equals 1.0. That's considered average. Companies with EMRs less than 1.0 those are the companies that have actual losses less than what's expected. So their ratio is going to be less than 1.0, and these are your higher performing companies. And having that EMR less than 1.0 can save companies a heck of a lot of money, depending on how low it goes. Lower is better with an EMR. You want low EMRs. You want below 1 for sure. But some companies they don't have EMRs below 1. If they have an EMR above 1, that means their actual losses were more than were expected. They had a really bad year, a really bad 3-year period, and the losses during that period exceed what was expected. So their EMR is above 1.0. EMR, as I said previously, it's an important measure. I would argue the most important measure in safety management. It affects your insurance premiums. It can make hundreds of thousands of dollars in difference in your insurance premiums. It also can prevent companies from getting work. A high EMR, an EMR say above 1.0, they may not be able to find work. They may not be able to find clients willing to work with them. And I'm coming here from an industrial model where you have a general contractor and subcontractors. If you have a general contractor that's hiring all these subcontractors, most general contractors aren't going to hire subs that have an EMR greater than 1.0. They look at more than just the EMR, but the EMR can be a deal breaker. Again, many general contractors will not consider subcontractors with an EMR greater than 1.0. I've heard of some companies that won't consider subcontractors that have EMRs greater than 0.90. 0.9 is the lower the better. Below 1 is good. But there are some very picky companies out there that they won't hire a subcontractor that's above 0.9, or it's at 0.90 or above. The EMR is considered a pretty good indicator of a company's safety performance over that 3-year period. Like I've said, it can save a company thousands of dollars or cost a company thousands of dollars. Most important measure of safety performance out there. Calculating the EMR. Again, I've already said it's the ratio of actual to expected losses. That's all you need to know from a calculation standpoint for our purposes in this class. But I want to just very quickly, your guys are going to glaze over because I'm going to go fast. What I want to get across to you is the complexity that goes into calculating the EMR. It's not a single formula, but there are multiple components and formulas that yield this single coefficient. By understanding a little bit more about the complexity of the process, it might allow us to manage our responsibilities in a way that could save companies money by understanding the EMR a little bit better. Again, EMR equals actual losses I divided by expected losses J. Again, here's actual losses I. But actual losses are equal to B plus H plus E times W plus 1 minus W times F. And I'll give you a list of what all these letters stand for here in just a second. Expected losses equals D plus H plus F times W plus 1 minus W times F. So actual losses, expected losses. These are the formulas to get those two numbers. Here are what those different letters represent, or these different variables represent. Again, A is the actual incurred losses, the total of actual incurred losses. B equals actual primary losses. C, expected losses. D, expected primary losses. E equals actual excess losses, which is another calculation. It's A minus B. F, expected excess losses, which is C minus D. W is a weighting value. It's a tabular value that's based on expected losses, C. Then H is also a tabular value. There are tables at the NCCI that will have weighting values and ballast values that are applied in the calculation of EMRs for different companies. It's also based upon expected losses. So there's a lot that goes into this, into the calculation of that single coefficient, that single value. Here is an example of a worksheet that would be used to do a calculation. This would be a worksheet, say, just for 1 year. We have expected loss, which is payroll multiplied by the expected loss rate divided by 100. Payroll multiplied by the expected loss rate divided by 100 gives us our expected losses in this column. Now, this is for one incident. Each of these code numbers here, these are for different incidents that a company might have during a year. And some companies might have multiple pages, multiple worksheet pages like this for 1 year. So keeping it kind of simple here, just to give you a taste of what's going on here. Expected primary loss is the expected loss that we have here multiplied by the D ratio. And there's more to it than I just wanted to point that out on this slide. Let's go ahead and look very quickly. And again, if you tune out, it's not the end of the world. But some of you won't. Some of you might be interested in delving into this a little bit more deeply. But let's do the EMR for a hypothetical construction company. This is their data for 2020. We have a column for expected losses, column for primary losses. Total expected losses, that's all of these values added up, 127,338. Expected primary losses, all of these values added. And there weren't any losses during this year. So they have 0 as far as actual incurred losses, which is good. Every company wishes they were this way. Oh, and I did make a mistake. These aren't claim codes. I said that incorrectly on the previous slide. These aren't claim codes. These would be akin to the work classification ratings, what we have here for codes. These are different work classifications. Let's say this is accounting. The ELR for accountants, D ratio for accountants, payroll for accountants, expected losses for accountants. Then we have welders and so on. The claim data, the actual loss data is over here on this part of the worksheet. And this is the same company, ABC Construction, for 2021. We have the same classification codes here. Payroll is different, so the expected losses are going to be different from 1 year to the next. The ELR, the D ratios, those are going to stay the same. But because payroll changes, that changes the expected losses. And the expected losses for this year, 142,388. Expected primary losses, 15,030. Then they did have some incidents during this year. And this is the number for each of the different incidents. They have the actual incurred losses of $73,080. They also had an actual primary loss of $54,723. We're not going to get into that. You're already probably confused enough. So we got data for 2020, 2021, and here's the worksheet for 2022. You take all of these numbers here that we've got highlighted, including actual primary loss, actual incurred loss, expected losses, expected primary losses. We plug these into our formula. And these are numbers taken from those 3 worksheets. Again, each worksheet represents a different year, 3 years. 1 worksheet for year, 3 years, 3 worksheets. But again, we'll use these numbers plugged into these formulas here to come up with our actual losses divided by expected losses. And when we do that, we end up with $529,470 in actual losses divided by $523,079 in expected losses, giving them an EMR that's just slightly greater than 1.01. That will be the EMR that's used for the premium calculations in 2024 for ABC Construction. And you guys are never going to have to do this, but I do think it's good for you to see kind of the process. I never did it myself, but I might still do it. I'd like to go to a NCCI workshop on EMR calculation. What I do know about the EMR and the calculation process is what I've learned on my own without a workshop. But again, for you in the future, that might be of some value to you to learn a little bit more about the process. Some additional points on the EMR. Having a lot of little claims during the year or during the period is going to be more harmful to your EMR than having 1 or 2 large claims. If you have, let's say you have 20 $15,000 claims, that's going to be worse than having 2 $3 million claims, because the actual primary loss is capped at $15,000 per claim. So those $1 million claims, when it comes to EMR calculation, $15,000 is entered for those losses. Even though it was $1 million loss, $1 million claim, they're capped at $15,000. But every one of those $15,000 injuries, they are included in the EMR calculation. So that's an explanation of why it's better. It's better not to have any claims, any injuries, but a lot of little claims are going to be more harmful to the EMR. Now, the cap is $15,000 now. In 2015, it was changed from $5,000 to $15,000. Again, for many years, the cap was $5,000. And with the cap it set at $5,000, small claims could really have a more of an impact. The increase of the cap was to help control the effect of small claims on the EMR. But small claims can still have an adverse effect on the EMR. Another thing about EMR and managing the EMR from a safety management standpoint, if we can manage our injuries in such a way that they are medical only claims, that's going to save the company money. It's going to have a positive effect for our EMR, and that's going to save the company money. There is an advantage for medical only claims. Medical only claims reduced by 70% for the purpose of calculating the EMR. So a $100,000 claim, or let's go with $50,000. So that $50,000 claim, that's going to be, if it's medical only, there's no lost work days, there's no indemnity that goes with it. That $50,000 claim is going to be reduced by 70%. It's going to be reduced by $35,000 as far as its effect on the EMR and the EMR calculation. It's going to be listed as a $15,000 claim. Again, just to summarize here, for our class, all I really expect you to know at this point is that the EMR is the ratio of actual to expected losses. Also know that it's based on 3 years of loss data. And also know that it's largely it's largely affected by the incidents we have in our workplaces. If we can minimize the incidents in our workplaces, we're going to have a low EMR. Even if we don't understand all the different components that go into it, keeping the number of injuries low, keeping the severity of injuries that we do have, keep those at a minimum, the severity, that's going to result in a advantageous EMR for your company, and it can save a lot of money. And when we start doing these calculations, you'll see the effect that EMR can have on workers' compensation claims. Another component of the standard premium calculation would be debits that may be incurred by a company. A debit represents an increase or a penalty that's paid, an increase above the manual premium after it's adjusted for the EMR. So we have our manual premium, multiply that by the EMR, then we will add a debit, which again is like a penalty. And this is often, these penalties that are applied to companies are oftentimes based upon subjective appraisals of the loss control specialist or other insurance maybe the underwriter. It's probably going to come down to the loss control specialist or the underwriter. So as a safety manager, if you work with loss control specialists, try to have a good relationship with them. Be nice to the loss control specialist. You don't want to argue or debate the loss control specialist. Even if they say something you don't completely disagree with, be careful how you disagree. So I'm not saying it's not okay to disagree, but be as nice as possible with your disagreements. Might be best just to not disagree at all or to express your disagreement, but if you do, be very careful, because they can go back to the underwriter and say, hey, they don't have a very good safety program. We need to add an additional debit to their premium. That's how the debits work. Again, underwriters along with loss prevention personnel determine the debits. Some possible reasons for a debit. Maybe the loss control specialist ascertains that management is not seriously involved with the safety program, that management really doesn't care about safety. That might result in an increased premium. Maybe they don't even have a safety program. That's probably going to cause an increased premium also. That's going to be considered a debit. Maybe they are working in a higher risk region of the country. Maybe they're building a bridge in West Memphis, Arkansas, where there's a high crime rate and auto theft and murder and everything else. That may also, even though it may not directly seem to be related to workers' comp, that could still, being in that region, could result in a debit. It could, in a higher risk region, it could lead to more injuries, higher medical costs, but not necessarily. But just being in that higher risk region could be enough. Maybe the company has a safety program, but they don't have a driver qualification program, or their OSHA compliance is not where it needs to be, or maybe they've received a lot of OSHA citations. There are 100 different ways, more than 100 different reasons that a debit may be imposed on a company. Maybe their frontline supervisors are inexperienced. Maybe it's a new manufacturing company. They're involved. Maybe got a new company, a startup, and they are manufacturing speakers. And all of the frontline supervisors are 19 years old. That would probably be a red flag for the loss control specialist. And because all of the frontline supervisors are only 19 years old, they impose a debit. They charge that company more for the insurance coverage. Again, a debit, like I said previously, can be thought of as a penalty on a company which, for whatever reason, is deemed to be a greater risk for the insurer. And what we do as safety management, we try to help our company with our safety program so that we do not seem to be a greater risk for the insurer. We try to represent our company so that it seems like a company, it has the qualities of a company that should not receive a debit. Well, ideally what we're going to end up having are credits, and we'll get to credits here in just a second. A credit is a flip side of a debit. It is a decrease. It's a good thing. It's a reward for companies that have good safety programs. Okay, debit is a value that needs to be calculated. So here is the way debits are calculated. You have your manual premium, you have your EMR, and then you have a percentage debit that's assigned by the insurance company. For example, a company's manual premium is $1.25 million or $1,250,000. Their EMR is 0.92. Because the company's management does not invest in a full-time safety director, or they do not invest in any full-time safety personnel, they are assigned a 12% debit. So what is the dollar value of that 12% debit? Plug in the $1.25 million, the EMR, and then convert the 12% debit to a decimal and put that right there, multiply everything out. The value of the debit is $115,000. And that value, $115,000, is going to be added to the manual premium multiplied by the EMR. Yeah, I've got more examples in another video, but if you have any questions, let me know. Let's talk about credits. Credit is a reward, like I said previously. It's a decrease below the manual premium after it's adjusted for the EMR. Again, it's also determined by the underwriters and loss prevention personnel. Some reasons for that a company may receive a credit, that they may receive this reward for being proactive with their safety. They have a well-developed safety program that's continually being improved. They have a good training program for their personnel. They participate in an industry association. And if it's an industry association that has an agreement with the insurance company, that can be a credit also. Maybe they have a defensive driving requirement for all drivers. I use this specifically. First two companies I was with, I think I mentioned Manhattan before in the defensive driving and the fleet safety management program there. But we saved a lot of money in insurance costs when we implemented defensive driving into our training curriculum. The money we saved more than paid for the cost of training the workers. And that cost can be substantial. You're paying workers 6 hours a day. Let's say you pay 20 workers 6 hours of their wages for sitting in a classroom. You multiply that by however many workers in the company, that's very expensive. Plus you have the other fees related to the training. Well, the credit that we received more than covered the cost of the training. The credits, the issuance of credits can also be subjective, just like debits can be subjective. It really comes down to loss prevention working with underwriting to determine what credits will be. Now, in some states, I don't think, to my knowledge, there hasn't been any changes in Oklahoma. Oklahoma doesn't have any of these requirements, but some states require credits be awarded to certain companies that meet certain requirements. So that might be something else depending on where you end up working. that may be another way that a company can earn credits. The value of credits calculated just like the value of debits. The value of a credit equals manual premium multiplied by the EMR multiplied by a percentage assigned by the insurance company. And here's an example. A company's manual premium is $1,800,000. Their EMR is 0.78. Because the company has recently hired a CSP and are investing in the safety of their workers, they are assigned a 10% credit. What is the dollar value of that credit? Just plug in all these values. 1.8 million, 0.78, convert the 10% to 0.10, do that multiplication. The value of that credit is $140,400. That's $140,400 savings for the company. It will be subtracted from the company's premium. When I say company's premium, it's subtracted from the manual premium multiplied by the EMR. We've talked about all the components that are involved in calculating the standard premium. I've shown you the formulas already, or I showed you a preview of the formulas, but let me summarize by showing you the formulas again and talking about the formulas. Again, let me define standard premium for you again. It's the manual premium that's adjusted for the EMR, debits and credits. Now, what I'm showing you here are two different formulas. This formula is the formula to use if the company is being penalized with a debit. We have audited payroll multiplied by the work classification. Within the brackets here, that's the manual premium. And we have the manual premium multiplied by the EMR. Then once that calculation's done, the debit is added to it. And remember, there's a separate formula for the calculating the value of the debit. If we have a credit, it's the same thing, except at the very end we're subtracting the credit. Again, this is the reward. We get to take it off the amount owed when we are awarded a credit. But manual premium multiplied by the EMR minus the credit. That gives us the standard premium when the company is being awarded a credit. That is pretty much it. There's several examples that I have in this video. There's a video tutorial calculating the standard premium. Several examples. Go through those examples, watch that video. Then once you watch that video, do the practice problems. Once you do the practice problems, then there will be a standard premium quiz or standard premium calculations quiz for you to complete. Let me know if you have any questions. We do have one more video lecture that I'm going to do for this unit, but it should be a short one.